our other states to follow Michigan's lead.
Really need to put forth that effort now. And when these resolutions, when I get back to Lansing, we will be working hard to push those through and get them passed and try to get some pressure on our president.
I'd like to call up our special guest. We have Mark Smith, and he's the Senior Policy Manager from the National Wildlife Federation.
Well, thank you, Senator, and welcome everyone. This is a real simple issue for National Wildlife Federation. We have a Great Lakes office just down the road in Ann Arbor, and our whole office is focused on protecting our Great Lakes. We're 20% of North America's fresh water right here. 95% of the fresh water in North America is here. We have a resource here that we need to protect, and I really appreciate the Senator's efforts on this. And it's just simple, straightforward. It's a dumb idea. We don't need it. How to do it. Really should do it for.
Like you said, I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager for MUCC, and we represent about 43,000 folks from around the state that all feel pretty much like what Mark said. This is a pretty dumb idea. At first glance, when someone tells you about it, you think it sounds crazy. You read into it, and it still sounds crazy. So it's only fitting that Michigan also leads the way on this issue. So MUCC, we fully support these resolutions, and so do all our members. We look forward to working with them and hoping to get these passed in time and manner.
We also have with us Gene Doss, and Gene Doss is here on behalf of the Michigan Environmental Council and James Cliff. Sensitivity of this issue, as well as the power in using and leveraging our voices in this conversation. We have with us Beverly Fernandez, and Beverly is the founding member and spokesperson for Stop the Great Lakes Nuclear Dump Incorporated. It's a non-profit citizens group based in Ontario, Canada. Beverly holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology from York University. She worked as a human resource manager during her career, including working for 12 years at York University. Beverly's volunteer resume includes working with children with disabilities, students in primary school, the Canadian Cancer Society, and an organization that built and supported a school for children in Afghanistan. Beverly has never been an activist until the seriousness of this issue compelled her to take action.
I am here today, as Senator Pavlo mentioned, a spokesperson for Stop the Great Lakes Nuclear Dump, or we call it STIGLID. We are a non-profit citizens group based in Ontario, Canada, that formed about a year and a half ago. We are deeply concerned that Ontario Power Generation, or the other acronym for the night, OPG, wants to build a deep geological repository, or DGR, to bury radioactive nuclear waste less than 1 mile from the shore of Lake Huron. When we learned of this plan, we decided something had to be done. We formed STIGLID to raise public awareness and engage Canadians and, importantly, Americans to take an informed stand to oppose OPG's plan. It is important that we understand the profound importance, absolute necessity, and sanctity of water. Fresh drinkable water is required for life on this planet. Without it, life cannot exist. Water is life. It is that simple. The availability of fresh water has been decreasing in recent years. In some countries of the world, people die every day simply because they do not have clean water to drink. Water is the most important and most precious natural resource. Without it, we will perish. The clean waters of the Great Lakes are North America's greatest asset. They are an irreplaceable treasure. Enter Ontario Power Generation. OPG wants to bury the most toxic, lethal, dangerous, and long-lasting poisonous material that humans have ever created right beside the life-giving waters of the Great Lakes. OPG wants to bury radioactive nuclear waste that remains radioactive for 100,000 years right beside our Great Lakes. And they cannot and will not provide any guarantee that this nuclear waste will not leak and contaminate the Great Lakes. Let me give you a bit of background information on OPG's plans for the DGR so that you can understand what they are proposing to do. So if you take a look at the screen here, OPG is planning to drill and blast down to a depth of 2,230 feet underground to create tunnels into which they will place radioactive waste. They call this a Deep Geological Repository, or DGR for short. In essence, it is a mine, and it is huge. A single tunnel is the length of 2 football fields and is about the height and width of a 2-story house. There are 31 of these underground tunnels, and in looking at the slide, you can see how deep they are underground, and if you look at the top of the slide, you can see how close they are to the waters of Lake Huron. The tunnels will hold 7 million cubic feet of nuclear waste in 53,000 containers. The DGR will be 37 acres above the ground and 74 acres below the ground. The location of the DGR will be on the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant site. This is the largest operating nuclear plant in the world. The nuclear waste dump is planned to be built less than a mile from the shore of Lake Huron in the municipality of Kincardine, Ontario. So if you see on the slide here, that is an aerial view of the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant site, and the red area is the proposed nuclear waste dump. This location is about 120 miles upstream from Port Huron. So again, if you look at the screen briefly, you will see all of the Great Lakes. You'll see the red dot for the proposed nuclear waste dump, and Port Huron is just to the south of that on Lake Huron. Now, OPG plans to bury all of Ontario's low and intermediate level nuclear waste from Pickering, Darlington, and Bruce nuclear generating stations in the DGR. Low-level waste includes contaminated mops, rags, and tools, and intermediate-level nuclear waste includes resins, filters, and irradiated components from within the nuclear reactors themselves. Intermediate-level nuclear wastes are highly radioactive, and many remain radioactive for over 100,000 years. And as if this isn't bad enough, OPG intends to double the size of the DGR so they can bury decommissioning waste in it as well. Decommissioning waste is basically the entire nuclear plant, excluding the nuclear spent fuel, after it has been mothballed and dismantled at the end of its life. Once the DGR is filled, it will be monitored for 300 years, and then it will be abandoned. 300 years might sound like a long time. However, when you realize that some of the nuclear waste will be buried in the DGR remains lethal and dangerous for over 100,000 years, 300 years is not very long at all. If this DGR leaks into the Great Lakes, after it is abandoned, future generations will have no way of knowing until it's too late. Let's talk about the approval process. It's a rather long and complicated process. In a nutshell, a 3-person joint review panel has been established to review OPG's application to construct the DGR. The joint review panel held public hearings last fall and are again holding public hearings beginning on September 9th of this year. The upcoming hearings will be in Kincardine, Ontario. Once the joint review panel completes the reopened hearings, within 90 days they must write a report and make recommendations to the Canadian Federal Minister of the Environment, who will then take it to the Federal Cabinet to render its decision. The Canadian government's decision is anticipated to occur sometime in the spring of 2015. Now that you have some background information about OPG's plan and the approval process, I'd like to talk about the many reasons to be alarmed about OPG's plan. Number 1, site selection. OPG did not consider any other sites for the location of this nuclear waste dump. Can you imagine that in an environmental impact statement document that contains 3,432 pages, OPG devotes the equivalent of 1 single page to this issue? And what is more incredible is that their comment on achievability and acceptability of an alternative site option, unknown. Stigland and many others view this to be a shocking admission. OPG failed to perform the most basic alternative due diligence. The siting of a garbage dump in Canada requires that numerous sites be considered and that the most suitable site be chosen. Yet OPG determined it was okay to present a single site beside North America's greatest freshwater supply without investigating any other options. What we have learned is that the municipality of Kincardine approached OPG to offer up its community as the location for the nuclear waste facility, and OPG said, great. OPG felt they had a willing community, and so they decided they didn't need to look any further. Now, if you look at the map that we provided here, you will see that Ontario is a vast province. OPG is owned by the Ontario government. You might be interested to know that 87% of Ontario's land mass is owned by the Ontario government. Now, out of 354,000 square miles, OPG decided to put this dump less than a mile from Lake Huron. Why did OPG not consider alternative sites on available Ontario government-owned land? Why did they not consider alternative locations that are located far from people and far from the drinking water of 40 million people? Why didn't they investigate a site located in the vast area of the Canadian Shield? OPG and the Ontario government have no answers to these important questions. In our view, the failure to consider any other sites is a fatal flaw and should be sufficient reason for the Joint Review Panel and the Canadian federal government to reject OPG's plan. Number 2, lack of public consultation. OPG has a legal responsibility to engage the public in a meaningful way about its plan. Now, meaningful public participation means ensuring that citizens and governments and environmental groups are notified well in advance so that they have time to properly investigate and provide comments on the matter. Letting people know about this issue at the 11th hour does not constitute meaningful public consultation. I have to confess that although I live about 20 miles from this site, I only learned of this plan 2 summers ago. According to OPG, they have been communicating with the public for about 7 years. And yet, millions of Canadians and Americans are still largely unaware of this plan. How is this possible? With billions of dollars at its disposal, you would think that OPG could design an effective communications program, one that would reach the 40 million people that would be affected by their plan. What has actually happened is that OPG's communication effort has been limited and focused primarily on the local communities. Not surprisingly, many of the people in the communities are OPG, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, or Bruce Power employees and retirees. And they receive a salary and a pension from the nuclear industry. They are clearly in a conflict of interest position. OPG also contacted elected officials in Kincardine and adjacent communities. And you should know that these same communities are receiving millions of dollars, 36 million to be exact, from OPG under a hosting agreement that requires them to express their support for OPG's DGR in exchange for these financial payments. Under this agreement, it clearly states that if the communities fail to show their support for the DGR, these payments could be cut off. These communities are conflicted because they are being paid to show their support. In our view, this is completely inappropriate. But what about the 40 million people who rely on the Great Lakes for their drinking water? OPG engaged in some very minimal discussions in Michigan, but certainly the people of Michigan were not consulted. And what about the citizens of New York, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Minnesota, and Indiana? And in Canada, what about Quebec and other communities in Ontario outside of Bruce County? all were not consulted. Essentially, very few outside of Bruce County were consulted. As we all know, the Great Lakes are all interconnected. Clearly, all of the Great Lakes provinces and states would be concerned about any proposal that may threaten their drinking water. Of course, if you don't contact these communities and tell them about the proposal, they won't know anything about it, and they won't have an opportunity to provide their views. Number 3, toxicity and longevity of the waste. As mentioned earlier, the proposed DGR will entomb low and intermediate level nuclear waste. While the low-level waste remains dangerous for about 300 years, some of the intermediate level nuclear waste remains radioactive, toxic, and lethal for 100,000 years. To put this into perspective, the Great Lakes themselves are only about 12,000 years old. Intermediate level nuclear waste is almost as toxic and radioactive as nuclear fuel. Now let's talk briefly about geology. OPG is planning to construct this dump in limestone. I'm not a geologist, but I do know that a deep geological repository in limestone is unproven and unprecedented anywhere in the world. Here is what the late Dr. William Fife had to say about this. And by the way, Dr. Fife is a geologist and Professor Emeritus in the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Western Ontario. He was widely considered amongst the world's most eminent geochemists and an international consultant on nuclear waste. And he says, and I quote, "You do not put nuclear waste near things like the Great Lakes or the Great Rivers in case there's a leakage that you haven't expected." End quote. The fact of the matter is that no scientist or geologist, including OPG's scientists or geologists, can guarantee that this nuclear waste dump will not leak. OPG cannot and will not provide any such guarantee. Number 5, and this is one of the most concerning. Other nuclear waste dumps are leaking, despite assurances this would never happen. Let me tell you about Maxey Flats, Kentucky. To be clear, Maxey Flats is not a deep geological repository, but it is a nuclear waste dump to hold low-level nuclear waste. What is important about Maxey Flats is the assurances that were provided to citizens. They were told that the possibility of off-site migration of the waste was, quote, essentially non-existent, end quote. Citizens were told it would take 24,000 years for the plutonium to travel 1/2 of an inch. Less than 10 years later, the plutonium was found 2 miles off-site. Let me tell you about OSA 2 in Germany. This is a deep geological repository. It was intended to permanently house low and intermediate level nuclear waste underground in a salt mine, supposedly in a completely dry and non-corrosive environment. Under a strict approval process, the government and scientists provided assurances once again to the people that this deep geological repository would not leak. 10 years later, 3,170 gallons of water per day started leaking into this DGR. They had no idea where the water was coming from or how to stop it. The groundwater is contaminated. The scientists were dead wrong. OSA 2 is an unmitigated disaster to this day. Their plan now is to try to remove the nuclear waste at a cost estimated at about $15 billion. However, this may not in fact be possible because the DGR is in danger of collapse. And now, closer to home, let me tell you about the DGR in Carlsbad, New Mexico. And it is called the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIPP for short. WIPP is the only operating DGR on the entire planet. It WIP is in a salt mine. It is used to hold nuclear waste from the U.S. Defense Program. Once again, the scientists and the assured the public that WIP would never leak. OPG held up WIP as a shining example of a DGR with a successful track record. WIP formed a very important part of the safety case for the planned Kincardine DGR that OPG presented to the review panel. Citizens were assured that WIP would contain its nuclear waste forever. A mere We would also encourage you to sign Senator Pavlo's petition, Protect Lake Huron. Senator Pavlo's petition will go to President Barack Obama. Finally, it is very important that you tell others what you have learned tonight. And please encourage friends, family, and fellow workers to sign our petition. Do whatever you can to spread awareness of this ill-conceived idea. Do whatever you can to help stop it. Work with your elected officials and environmental organizations. Write to your local newspapers. You can make a difference. In the words of Margaret Mead, quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world.